Hello there, World of Tankers, and welcome to the channel. I'm your host, World of Tanks Blitz, and if you wanted to learn about the Italian auto-reloading heavies, this is the right place for you. In today's video, I will be showcasing the Tier 8 auto-reloading heavy, the Tier 9, and making our way to the Tier 10 Rinoceronte. These vehicles are all fantastic. I think this is one of the best and most fun lines Wargaming has released in a very long time, so I would highly recommend to consider grinding this as your next vehicle. I'm not going to be showcasing the Tier 7 in today's video. Why? Because there's really not much going for it. It's just an average Tier 7. It doesn't have anything particularly amazing in armor, the gun, or really any aspect. I mean, it's an alright tank, but yeah, I don't know. I'm going to start at the Tier 8 because this is where you actually get into the line and the capabilities, so I think it's a little bit easier to showcase altogether. So we're going to be starting off with the Tier 8 Progetto 54, and we're going to take a brief look at its stats, and then we'll move over to the armor. Let's take a look at the gun. You have 4 seconds of intra-clip, which is quite a while actually. But, to be fair, it has pretty good DPM of 2,115. You'll notice Shell 2 has a 5.25 second reload, and Shell 1 has an 8.51 second reload. Now, for any of you who do not understand how auto-reloading tanks work, on paper, it looks like shooting your second shell, reloading, shooting your second shell gives you the most effective DPM. However, that is not the case, because you have to remember, you have a 4-second shot time before you can start reloading shell 2 once again. So because of that, it's actually a 9.25 second reload for shell 2. It is much faster to dump and just use shell 1. Now, to be fair, it's actually not that big of a difference, only about 0.3-ish seconds between shell 1 and 2 if you're using the intra-clip, so really it doesn't matter if you dump the clip or not, but be known that you don't lose DPM at all for dumping the clip. You actually gain DPM. So if you have the opportunity to shoot 2 shells into somebody, do it. There is literally no downside. When it comes to the average damage, it's on the lower side, 300, but because it has a double shot gun, it's not that big of a deal because you still deal 600 in 4 seconds. Pen-wise, it's fantastic. 240 on the standard is amazing. 270 on the premium is also very good. And with 9 degrees of gun depression, this tank is flexible on really any ridgeline you play. It's got a solid power to weight of 15, a top speed of 37, and a reverse of 17, so it's just a fast tank. It's got solid gun depression. The final thing you obviously want to check on is the armor. So is it good? Is it bad armor? Well, let me make my way over to Armor Inspector very, very briefly so we can get an idea of what we are working with here, and there you go. Just had to swap a couple tabs. So this is the vehicle's armor on flat ground. Its upper plate, and let's put on enhanced because that's what you should be running. Its upper plate's 200 mils thick. Not good. Tier 7s, yeah, they might bounce you, but Tier 8s aren't going to bounce that at all. It's a little troll. If the shell flies a little wide, as we can see, you might get some bounces because of the way the hull works. We can see that it's angular, or it's rounded, I should say. So because of that, it's very funky on its armor, but for the most part, you just shoot dead center, and you're going to pen the most of the time. Lower plate's even worse, only about 70 mils thick, but it's very steep, as you can see, and because of that, it's very troll to actually aim in at, and if it's angling at all, it's going to be actually really, really awkward aiming on that lower plate. So I recommend just to shoot right dead center at the upper plate if you have the chance. The turret on flat looks very strong. You know, its upper part is 240, the lower part's 240 as well. But the problem is using gun depression, we can see it makes this entire undercarriage of the turret only about 213 thick. So you got to be very careful about that. Ideally, you want to use it on flat ground, hide your lower plate, and only use the upper plate, but it's a little funky in that regard. Honestly, I just don't think the Tier 8's armor is very good. Its side armor isn't very good either. So you're going to have to be quite cautious in that situation when you're actually using the vehicle. But it's fine because it does feature a double shotgun, as I went over. It has decent mobility and it has very good penetration. So even if you do get penned occasionally when you're hull down using the turret, or you know, you get shot in the hull, I don't think it's that big of a deal because the rest of the vehicle's characteristics make up for it. The whole line really isn't focused on armor, in my opinion, especially the Tier 10. I was expecting the Tier 10's armor to be really good, especially because when I tested it, the vehicle was amazing hull down. It was over 400 millimeters on the turret. However, with the nerfing of enhanced armor, and the fact that Wargaming has also buffed heat pen on tank destroyers and heavies alike, it means that the Rhino's turret is not as strong as it nearly was in test. And with that, they also nerfed the turret a little bit. So you pair all those things together. And yeah, it's not as strong armor-wise, but because the gun is so good on the tier 10, it makes up for it immediately. So we are in a tier 8 matchup, and this is what I like to see. It's all tier 8 as well, so it's a good example for what you're going to be dealing with in most situations when you play. We can see the mobility here, and as I said, the tank is fairly mobile. And it's also not a large vehicle, which is nice because you're not going to be the center of attention. You know, you're not driving a VK-168 where every brother and their mother sees you. You're in a fairly small vehicle, which is quite nice, and doesn't make you that big of a target. We have the T-34 on our side, and we're going to aim in right on that T-34. Unfortunately, the shell goes just a little bit too high, and because of that, we aren't able to get it out. Not that big of a deal, though. With the auto-reloading mechanic, we are able to get our second shell back into the barrel, and with 9 degrees of gun depression, we can easily poke the Skoda T-56 and get a pen right into his tank. And then we're going to dump our second shell into his hatch, and it bounces the hatch. That's just cringe. I mean, that was a very well-aimed shot, and it just decided not to pen. Let's try again. Oh, you'll notice while this gun is decent, it does lack a little bit in the accuracy department. It's not bad, it's just not crazy good in that regard either. And as you'll notice, we get penned right in the weak spot I was talking about. When you're hull down, you can get shot directly through the lower part of the turret. So yeah, the tank definitely has its fair share of weaknesses. Man, you can see though, the gun's a little bit sussler. Our team's doing pretty poor right now, I will admit that. We're going to aim it on the lower plate of the Chrysler. Right now, we really aren't able to do too much in terms of our damage output. And we are actually in a very sus situation. We got the Chrysler pushing us, which is not ideal. But let's see if we can bait the Barask around here, and we can, there you go, get some good damage out. We get a shell into the Chrysler ourselves. He gets lit on fire, and I don't think he enjoyed that, to be honest. But this is a very, very poor situation that has been presented in front of us. We're going to back out, and hopefully we can get our second shell here. We track the enemy Skoda. That's obviously pretty nice. We're going to aim it on the T-49 as well. And there you go. Nice 302 shot into his tank. Pretty good stuff. We're going to probably die here. I mean, our heavies, for some reason, are on the other side of the map, which does not help me, even remotely. But we do get a bounce, actually, from the enemy Skoda there. As I said, the lower plate on this tank is really troll, and a lot of people don't realize that. But it actually allows you to get some very wonky bounces. So I actually really like that about this tank. We have the Rev. We have basically everybody on us here, which is a little disappointing. But we get a nice shot into the enemy tank there. Let's hope the Rev... Oh, he lights us on fire. Rather unfortunate. But either way, as we can see, the Tier 8 gun and overall capability is very solid. While our team absolutely sucked, that is no effect on the tank we drove itself. We were able to work well hull down, and even though you did notice that the turret has a bit of a weakness, and, you know, the hull is pretty mid, because of the fact that the vehicle has solid DPM on single shot, and the fact you have that second shell, basically whenever you have the opportunity to back up and reload, you just get the second shell for free. That's what I always recommend to do. If you're more than halfway through your reload on the second shell, you might as well just wait for it to come back, and then boom, slap somebody once. They might think that, oh, he doesn't have another shell. Boom, you slap them again. You basically just get a free 300 damage every time you load in a clip. So as you can see, we did 3,400 damage, which is a very solid result. I mean, the next highest on our team was literally 3 times less than us. As I said, there's just not much you can do in results like this. It's not the tank's fault, so I wouldn't really blame the vehicle at all. We're going to do one more battle in the Tier 8. I think 2 games in the Tier 8 is more than enough to showcase its capabilities. And the line honestly plays like the Tier 8. This is something I really like. I hate when Wargaming releases lines when the Tier 8 and 9 play nothing like the Tier 10. And it's not very common, but you do see it time to time. Like the TVP VTU, which is the Tier 8 on the TVP 5051 line, plays nothing like the Tier 9. And it's a little irritating because you play the Tier 8 and you're like, okay, and then you get to the Tier 9 and you're like, wow, they literally have nothing in common. It would make a lot more sense if a vehicle like the Skoda T27 was the Tier 8 on the line, as it would fall perfectly in place with the Skoda T56. So it's a little bit wonky in that regard. Same thing for like the VZ55, you know, the Tier 8 on the VZ line. The TNH VZ51 plays nothing like the Tier 10. The VZ51 has really no hull armor, its turret is pretty dookie, its alpha isn't very high, and when you compare that to the Tier 10, it's just not even remotely close. Same for the Tier 8, so Personally, I don't love that. I like that the Rhino line has a lot of similarities between the tier 8, 9, and 10. It creates a seamless grind when you go from tank to tank to tank. That's why, as I said, I'm not really focusing on the tier 7 because it doesn't play anything like the rest of the vehicles, so I don't really think it even makes sense to show in the video. So here we are, game number 2. We are up against AMX 1390, CDC, and a Pershing. Okay, decently strong mediums, but nothing crazy. They also have an SMV Contra Caro 64 and a T-77, both very capable, heavily armored tanks. There's definitely a decent amount of scary opponents we're going to have to deal with here, but I'm not too worried. By the way, look at the mobility. I mean, this thing is fast. We're on medium terrain here. We are literally out-accelerating our Centurion Mark 5-1. This is a very mobile tank, and because of that, it makes it incredibly enjoyable to drive and very flexible to mess around with. Now, I am going to be making my way to this hull-down ramp here. We're going to see if we can get some shells out into our opponents. This is the ideal situation for using the tank hull-down, is when you're up against lower-tiered opponents, because obviously the armor is going to work out a little bit better. But, of course, the T-77 is the vehicle that's right in front of us, so we do get penned right in the hull, I would guess. Oh, no, we actually got shot on the side of the turret. Now, this is the advantage of a tank like this over a T-77, is that while the T-77 obviously has to reload, we can just get shells out. By the way, I am running V-stabs on this tank, but even then, the accuracy on move is pretty poor, as you'll notice. Oof, man, we got hit by an SU-152 right in the turret. Couldn't even have predicted he would have been back there. He's in a position that's really just not able to be predicted. Oh man, yeah, the dispersion on this tank is really not going well for us right now. Okay, well, let's see. Let's aim it on that SU again, and we are... There you go, able to slam a shell in. The only thing I will say I don't love about this tank is that low alpha. It's pretty low, and it is a little bit disappointing when you're only chunking people for, you know, 300-ish a shot, but we're going to wait for our second shell. That was a pretty mediocre shell, I will admit there. But it's not that big of a deal. We're going to load in an HE on the CDC. There you go. An absolute juicer, 427 damage, high explosive into his tank. This tank does hit hard with HE, as you can see. And we're going to see if we can get another... Oh, unfortunate. It was close to being a pen, but no cigar. I mean, either way, we're getting out good shots here. We're supporting our team. These are all important things to do. Nice 307 into the enemy Tiger 1. I would say my favorite part about this tank is the reverse speed. Reversing at 17 is incredibly flexible, and it makes this tank so nice to drive. So there you go. The Tiger's already dead. This is a more average game for the SMV. We can see that you're not really ripping out damage like crazy, but you're able to use the tank hull down, you're able to get out some shells, and you're able to deal a decent amount of damage. So we're going to get to the side of the SMV, and we're going to use those 9 degrees gun depression to slam a shell into his tank. And there you go. Pretty solid result. We were able to deal upwards of maybe 2,700 damage this game, which is pretty good for a tier 8 match, and we easily finished top in the team. I'm pretty confident in that. So, yeah, it's a fun tank. 2846 damage, as I did say, top in the team quite easily. It's not the best tier 8. I definitely think the Bisante is a better vehicle as a premium, but I do like the way this gun works. It constantly has shells, the mobility is nice, so while it doesn't have the most armor, it makes up for it in other characteristics. It's flexible, it's very enjoyable to drive. The only thing I really don't like is it's really bad on movement dispersion. It's got poor aiming time and poor dispersion for only 300 alpha. But as I said, at least you have 2 shells and solid DPM to make up for that. Now we make our way to the tier 9, the Progetto 66. This vehicle takes a big leap in alpha. It goes from 300 to 400, and this is why I really like the tier 9. Not only does it hit a lot harder, but it's got really good pen, 271 on the standard, 370 on the heat, which is really nice. The vehicle has solid DPM again, 2,100, basically the same as the tier 8, but because you have that alpha jump, it's still very nice. Again, it looks like Shell 2 has better DPM than Shell 1, but that is not the case. There's a 3.53 second interclip. If you add 3.53 to 8.87, that is around 12 seconds. So you're still gaining DPM on dumping the clip. Same dispersion, basically the same aiming time, but at least you have more alpha, so it makes a little bit more sense, and you have 8 degrees of gun depression on this tank. The only thing I didn't love about this vehicle compared to the tier 9, or the tier 7, 8, and 10 is that it has the worst reverse speed of the bunch at 15. It's a little weird, you know, the rest all go 17, and then you have this tank which goes 15. It's not that big of a deal. 15 is still plenty, but I definitely noticed it when I was playing. I was like, wow, it does not feel as maneuverable as the tier 10 or the 8. But I really like the gun. In fact, I think this tank has more pen than the tier 10 if I'm not mistaken. So we're going to showcase just what the Progetto 66 can do. Overall, very, very solid tank. And while we're waiting to load in the battle here, let's pull up the armor profile very briefly so you can get an idea of what it looks like. So let me just click on the Progetto 66. Let's take a look at what we're working with. Armor-wise, it's way better than the tier 10 again. With enhanced armor, its upper plate's about 240. Its lower plate's only about 115. So you definitely want to hide the lower plate, but even with like 360, 70 mils of heat, we can see that the turret on this vehicle is very strong. The edges are 400. The upper plate's 358. These little window cutouts right on the side of the vehicle are really going to be your only weak spot. So armor-wise, the tier 9 is honestly really effective. And as long as you're hiding that lower plate, it's very good. And even if you aren't hiding that lower plate, again, it's a very steep angle. And because of that, if you drive it properly, you can get some very, very good bounces. So we're going to be making our way up the hill. You can see here the mobility on this tank is pretty good. Again, it's nothing crazy. My team's going down. As I said, this is a hull-down vehicle. And unfortunately, Wargaming doesn't know how good map design is. And Middleburg is a map that really has no hull-down positioning in town. There is no berms to hide your tank. There's no nothing. And because of that, it is an incredibly unenjoyable map to get. And when you pair that with the fact that my entire team has decided they want to go town, it's just a really, really bad combination. But hey, at least the enemy team's going town as well, so we can take advantage of that. Alright, so we are going to go wide here. We're going to aim it on the enemy keeler if we can. Aiming, and we're going to load a heat shell right into his upper plate for 349. Alright, not too bad. We're going to move up. And the nice thing is, with this tank, you obviously do gain DPM when you're not shooting. So it's not really that big of a deal if I don't get a shell out this exact second. IS-6 shoots, and as I said, you gain DPM dumping the clip. So I get 1, I get 2. That is literally 800 health off of that enemy IS-6. I mean, that's a lot of HP. And now what we're going to do is we're just going to flank. I think it's much more smart in this current game just to get to the side of these enemies here. And especially because we can just reload both shells. We don't bleed any health for this. You know, always having 2 shells is nice because you're not bleeding health to get them into the gun. So we're going to get 1 shell into the side of the IS-6 for 500. And we're going to aim it on the rear of the Conqueror for another, 550 juicer. So we are already up to 2,200 damage at this point. I mean, that's a lot of damage when you think about it. And you can very easily get it out as well. Now, unfortunately, as I did go over, my team sucks. I mean, we're literally losing, even though this is like the easiest win ever. Literally, the game has been less than a minute and our team's dead. Like, great job, guys. But whatever. We're just going to try and use our single-shot DPM here. We're going to track the enemy Centurion, which obviously locks him down in place, which is obviously pretty nice. We're already up to 2,700 damage in this game, which is pretty good. We have the enemy a mill in front, and we're going to load in. Well, I was going to do an HE, but I just don't see any world where that really matters. Let's aim it on the 1390. Let's wiggle. But as you can see, the hull armor on this tank is not very good, and you shouldn't be expecting to get bounces with the hull armor in this vehicle. But what we do get is a nice 490 HE. We actually did get a bounce there, which is pretty solid, to be honest. Well, it's not going great for us right now. We're going to load in 1 more shell into the mill before we die, and we get out some decent damage. Decent gun, as you can see. I mean, the gun on this vehicle is absolutely fantastic. And this is a great example. I mean, we did over 4,170 damage. We blocked a decent amount for being on flat ground. As I said, its hull is a bit troll. So even though it doesn't have good armor, for people that are shooting at you on the move, that are panicking when you're aiming at them, they will bounce you. You will get some decent shots out. Unfortunately, I had the worst team I've ever seen in my life, and they literally couldn't last 10 seconds. We pushed right into the enemy team. We killed the Conqueror, we killed the IS-6, and we basically took about 2,200 HP off the enemy within the first minute of the game. But in that time, our entire team was dead. I seriously don't know how that's possible, but that's how the matchmaker works currently. I mean, it's bad. Right now, the game is at a very bad state. I'm going to be completely honest. Teams are quite poor. But let's do one more game and see if the Progetto can obviously do just as well once again. As we saw in the first game, the gun, the tank itself, very flexible, very enjoyable to drive. And that's what I'm always looking for when I'm trying to have fun or choose a tank that I want to play in. This is definitely a tier 9. You will see me rolling around in time to time because of its characteristics. It's great. It doesn't have bad DPM. It's flexible. It's got armor. It really is a great vehicle. Honestly, I think the tier 8 and 9 are just as flexible. In fact, I think the Tier 9 is actually more flexible than the Tier 10 in most situations, just because of the fact you basically have the same alpha at a tier lower with more penetration and just as good turret armor when hull down. So I really, really like the Tier 9. I think that this is the strongest of the tier, if you want my opinion. Go figure. The Tier 9 is almost always the strongest of the tier. So we can see the Shark has gone all the way over towards the... what is that Barask doing? Well, we get a nice shell into the Barask. Our T-77 gets a nice shell out. And we get a shell into the Kampfpanzer 70. Again, as I said, dumping the clip is the most effective way to get use of your damage per minute. So that's exactly what we've done here. Unfortunately, our teammate is not doing a great job. But there you go. Nice shell into the Kampfpanzer 70. 8 degrees of gun depression allows this tank to work Mines Hill perfectly. And as you can see, we are already getting out a solid amount of damage here. Our T-77 is going to poke. He gets one pen out. We're going to poke. We're going to get a shell into the Conqueror. People don't realize how poor the side armor of the Conqueror is. It's pretty freaking awful. So at this point, we are just a single shot tank. That's really all we are. But as I said, it doesn't really matter. You can be a single shot in this vehicle and rip out damage. We are already at about 2,000 damage dealt, which is pretty solid. And again, you really want to shoot on single shot. This tank has the most effective DPM when doing this. We get a nice bounce from the 704. Not that big of a deal, though. We're just chilling here. We're just getting out good shells as it is. 704 is going to run away, which I really could care less about. We're aiming on the enemy Conqueror. There you go. Our 368 mils of heat cuts right through his tank. At this point, we're going to turn around. I'm going to ignore this flank of the map. We're going to go help out with the Shark and the rest of the players over on this flank, because there's really no point to hold. I don't know why I would even bother. Alright, and this is where obviously the double shot mechanic of this vehicle is very nice, because in this current situation, we get both of our shells loaded. So I got one shell into the Shark, and we get 2 into the Shark, and there you go. That's 800 damage, which a normal single shot would only have dealt 400. So now we ignore the Shark, and, well, actually, we are going to be able to kill this player, so I might as well get some extra free damage. There you go. Nice 100 and whatever extra. And now we're going to continue making our way up into the front line. You can see why this tank is very flexible. The DPM is nice, the damage output is solid. It's just a great tank in general. Unfortunately, we do get kind of chunked by the 704, but I could care less. We still have 800 health. I bet you that Vickers is going to try and be annoying, though, and poke this, but I really could care less. We're going to get hull down here. We're going to get one shell into the 704. He misses me, and we're going to get one more out. Of course, we get lit on fire. That's one thing you'll notice about the Italian tanks, and it's one thing I've noticed quite a lot, is that these vehicles love to get lit on fire. My first game in the Progetto 54, we got lit on fire, and this tank also got lit on fire. That is just something you're going to have to expect for this tank, is poor modules. I don't know why, but that's the case. Either way, we did 4,300 damage in this game. We easily held the hill, we easily bled out our opponents, and had a solid job. For people that are going to complain, you didn't fight tier 10s, it really doesn't matter, to be honest. I mean, the tank has very good armor whether you're fighting tier 10s or tier 8s. It has enough pen to cut through them, and with the way the gun works, it really just doesn't make a difference. So I think that's fine, and a great showcase of the Progetto 66 in general. So then we make our way to the Rhino. I obviously had my initial review on the Rhino already, talking about its capabilities. The Rhino has a lot of advantages over the rest of the vehicles. First of all, it has the best aiming time out of the bunch, which is obviously quite nice. It also features much better dispersion than the rest. 0.317 base, I'm running refined gun, so it's 0.269. The vehicle features a very solid auto-reloading time. 8.33 seconds for Shell 2, 9.72 for Shell 1. Basically, you're just gaining flat DPM when, again, you are a single-shot vehicle. And this tank has really good DPM. 2,600 is solid. I mean, if you look at any other, tier 10, that's really good DPM. Sorry, my Alexa was going off there, but as I was saying, if we look at any other tier 10, let's say like a VZ55, even with Rammer, a VZ is sitting at 2582 DPM. Looking at a 60 TP with Rammer, you're looking at 2500. Looking at the Stritzvon K, this is one of the highest DPM tanks, you're at around 3200, but without Rammer, which nowadays, because of the way Cali was basically buffed and Rammer was nerfed, you're looking at like 3,100 DPM. This has very solid DPM, and it is no slouch in that regard. Pen-wise, it's pretty solid, 362 mils. As I said, the tier 9 actually has more pen, but it's still not a problem. 360 is more than enough to deal with players in front of you. So let's make our way back over to the armor department and see just what the Rinoceronte has going for it. So let's take a look here. And we're going to put on enhanced armor once again. So on flat ground, it's about 290 millimeters thick. It's good. It's not great. You're going to get bounces, but basically anybody loading gold is going to pen your turret every single time, as it's only about 320 mils of thick. So, pretty I mean, even mediums are going to pen you on flat ground in the turret. Basically, BZ75 levels of turret armor. If you're using it hull down, with the 7 degrees it has, the upper part of the turret is around 370, but the lower part is only about 350. So if people are aiming low with their heat, they will easily cut through the turret of this tank. And because of that, it's a very unreliable vehicle in terms of armor. It's okay, but it's definitely nothing incredible. It's not Kron levels, it's not 60 TP levels. Even the VZ, I would say, has a more reliable turret. But if you know how much pen your opponents have you're going up against, you can get a lot of bounces. The problem is, with the latest update of the game, Wargaming just buffed Calibrated. So basically, every heavy now has upwards of 370 mils of heat. The E100, the VK72, both are upwards of 375. And because of that, it means that even fully hull down, your turret is still a 50-50 pen against vehicles like that. You have to be very cautious. And when I first started playing this vehicle, had this false sense of protection. I was like, oh man, I'm going to play this tank hull down and that thing's going to pen me. That is not the case. You have to know how much pen your opponents have. The AMX 50B, for example, has 352 millimeters of APCR. It's one of the highest penning tier 10s in the game. You have to be careful about that. The AMX M4 has 373 mils of heat pen. Got to be careful about that. These are things you have to keep in mind while driving the vehicle. So this game, I'm going to go towards medium side. Our 50B is, our 2113 GFTs are, so I'm going to go towards medium side as well. The things that I really like about the Rhino, first of all, it's fairly mobile. It goes at a top speed of 40 kilometers per hour, and it has a reverse of 17. These are both values that you obviously really want. Not only is it fairly mobile, but it also features a really, really solid overall accuracy value, which means that it's quite flexible on hitting its shots, on just getting the job done. It's got nice alpha, 420, and it's got a faster interclip than the rest of the tanks on the line, which is quite nice. So as we can see, it does not appear the enemy team is going towards this side of the map. So what we're going to do is we're going to get here, and we do spot the enemy AMX M4, but rather unfortunately he was just fast enough to get around before we were able to spot him. However, if we move right here, I think we should easily be able to, yeah, there you go, detect the enemy AMX, and, well, that shell does not pen. That was rather unfortunate. However, oh, okay. Well, even with refined gun and .26 dispersion, our accuracy is still a little sussler, I guess, because both of those shells ended up missing. You'll notice that about the Rhino. That's the one thing I don't really love about the tank, is that the gun is derpy for some reason. I mean, it's got really good accuracy, but it just decides to miss shots that it shouldn't for weird reasons. But we can see where the majority of the enemy team is, and we can see where they aren't. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to make my way over here. We're actually going to start off by aiming it on the rear of the enemy Rhino, possibly. Let's see. Nope, not able to pen that at all. We have the enemy AMX over here. Oh, and the AMX just slams the shell right into us. The 4202 slams the shell right into us. This is a really bad situation. And you can see how it's really awkward to drive this tank when you're not hull down. It's not necessarily the Rhino's fault, it's just that's the way it is, but we got a nice shell into the enemy 4202. That's already 800 hit points off of his tank. Pretty good stuff. So, yeah, we're all right in this current situation here. We're going to move up a bit. We're going to get hull down. I'm hoping that our team is able to hold off the enemy Rhino from behind. We can kind of make our way over here. We hit the hatch, but it does not pen. That is a classic wargaming moment. But the second shell, because again we are an auto reloader, does connect right where we want it to, which is quite nice. The Rhino on our rear is getting bled out, which is really important, obviously. We have the 50B right in front, and well, we're just going to wait a little bit, and my game's lagging every now and then. I don't know if you guys are seeing that, but I'm having a little bit of frame dropping, and I don't know why, but my Blitz has been doing that lately. It's very irritating. Yeah, it happened right there again. And it's always when I'm pressing the fire button, but I don't know. It's not the biggest deal ever, but it can be a little bit annoying when I'm trying to obviously get out a shell. Again, every time I press the fire button it happens, but we're doing pretty good in the Rhino. We're already up to 2,000 damage at this point, which is pretty solid. And we're getting out, obviously, decent damage. We're holding hull down. These are all things you want to do in a vehicle like this. Now, the WZ would not surprise me if he does cut right through my turret hull down. But, at the same time, it's not that big of a deal. We get a nice shot into the enemy AMX. We We have the WZ on our flank here. We're not able to pen the WZ from this angular, but that's not too big of a deal. We're just going to get hauled down over here. We're going to aim it on the flat side of the WZ. We get a nice 419 pen. We're going to overpoke, and we're going to get another nice 390 pen. That's where the double shot comes into play. You know, you can't do that in a single shot vehicle. And it allows this tank to feel very, very flexible whenever you're driving it. We're going to aim it on the WZ's lower plate. We get another 422 damaging shell. Pretty good stuff so far. Looks like the 4202 is going to try and rush us. He bounces us once. And let's see, 4202 is now going to run. We're going to load in a... Aw, that was just a bad shot. I kind of fumbled my shells. I fat-fingered the button, and because of that, I didn't really get the shell out. But it's not that big of a deal. We're still going to get the shell, so it doesn't really make that much of a difference. Either way, pretty good result for the Rhino. We were able to get out a lot of damage. We were able to showcase where the vehicle does well. You get hauled down, you use your gun, and you out-trade your opponents. That was a 4,267 damage game. We aced it, and we had a pretty fun result in the process. This is why the Rhino feels so flexible. Is even if you're in a situation where you feel like, I'm not doing great, the gun is just really nice. I mean, I'm running refined on it, and because of that, when you get sitting still, you can get some really accurate shells out, especially with the way refined was buffed in the latest update. I've been messing around with it, seeing how I like it. I'm 50-50. I mean, I love V-stabs, but I don't know, 15% better dispersion is quite a huge buff. It's about 0.5 better on this tank when fully aimed in, so that is quite incredible. So here we are, one more game. Let's see what we can do. Up against us, we have an AMX-30B and a Balchation and a Caro. Okay. Well, we'll see what we are able to do. Yep, I do agree with the team. I will make my way over towards this side of the map. Alright, well, we have an IS-4 with TVP shared, and we got some nasty tanks. Unfortunately, one of our stronger vehicles, the Kron, is just not going with the team. Classic, you know, blind teammate. Well, at least he turns, but still a little disappointing to see that happen. Now, what we're going to do this game is we're going to head wide here. We're going to go all the way wide like this. And the reason you want to make this route is because if you ever drive up here and you get detected, tank destroyers can actually shoot you in the crossing. You just don't want to do that. It's not worth it. You don't want to be spotted in the crossing. So take the safe route, go wide like this in a position where the enemy team isn't going to be able to hit you. And just like that, we've obviously made it quite safely all the way over here. You can see that the WZ is going to go quite aggressive off to the flank. And we're going to move up ourselves. Oh, wow, that guy got absolutely nuked. We have the Kron in the open, and we're going to aim in on his vehicle. We do get penned from the enemy WZ. Rather irritating. Did not think he was going to be able to hit me from that angle, but he was. And look at that. That heat shell goes directly through my turret. It shows you just how mid the armor on this vehicle's turret is. It's really disappointing, honestly. But it's not that big of a deal because you can make up for it in the rest of this vehicle's characteristics. So we're going to drive up here, and we're going to see if we can just push off that 30B. There you go, nice 410 into his tank, and we're going to aim it on the Caro possibly. There you go, nice 403. That's 800 damage once again, dumped off of our opponents. So even though we've bled a bit of health, we're easily getting out more than we're bleeding in this current situation. We're going to aim it on the Rhino here. 508 roll. Because this tank has 420 alpha, it rolls pretty dang hard, and it feels really nice when it does. So we're going to aim it on the enemy Caro here. There you go, nice 449 shot. Because this tank has 2,700 base DPM, it's just really flexible in really the majority of situations you use it. That made no sense. Literally made 0 sense, but whatever. We're just going to aim it on the Caro at this point. Or actually, you know what? Yeah, we're going to aim it on the Caro. I'm hoping that we could have HE'd him, but we obviously weren't able to get that out in the end. Oh, come on, Kron, move it, move it, move it. I want to get one more shell out here. That Balchation is obviously going to run more towards this way, so we got a nice shell into the bat chat, and we ram him as well for a little bit more. Nothing crazy. He dies, and we deal over 3,500 damage, so there you go. The Rhino is just a fantastic tank. It really is. The gun is great, the DPM is fantastic, and there's no complaints. I mean, as I said, the armor on the turret, don't get fooled by it. It's not amazing. You're going to be penned all down. Tank destroyers are literally going to butter straight through your turret. But that's fine, and that makes it balanced. If this vehicle was not penetrable haul down like it was in test, it would have been broken. And that's why in test I averaged literally over 4,400 in the tank. But now that we obviously have the vehicle in its current state, and it's been released and everything, I've really been enjoying it. I'm averaging 3,600 damage in the vehicle. I have an 80% win rate solo for 23 games. It's fantastic. It's enjoyable. I like the camo. I think overall Wargaming did a great job on the line. So personally, I would highly recommend to grind this tank. I think it's amazing, and I really think Wargaming did a great job balancing it. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. As always, if you enjoyed today's video, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.